the USPTO didn't see that it was bogus. They awarded the patent to this guy. And so therefore, we can't patent the idea. And they don't even appreciate the brilliance of math magic blocks. Well, Drew was upset, to say the least, but he doesn't take things lightly. So he said, I'm going to fly back to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to visit with that patent examiner, and I'll explain to her, I'll just show her. So I took my math magic block set, which was still kind of dusty, but blew the dust off, gave him a scale, he got in the plane, flew to Washington, D.C., and then he sat there, and in front of her, he put a 2-block and a 3-block on one side and showed that it didn't balance with a 5, it balanced with a 6. And I mean, 2 and 10 is 20, and over again. She wouldn't back down. I mean, no matter how many times he showed her, how many times he had her manipulate it, she still said, no, 2 times 3 equals 6. Lynn's patent holds. And I think that the reason is that she knew that if she backed down, there'd be a lot of work for her, and she'd have some crow to eat as well. So she was just hoping that if she stuck to her guns, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It doesn't hold water, but that's what I'm sticking to. That maybe Drew would just fly back to California and forget about it. Well, he did the first half, but he didn't do the second half. He wrote an appeal, and this appeal it's the funniest thing I've ever read. If you've ever read a legal document, a dense legalese, I mean, they just go to all kinds of length to make something totally clear. And for you and me, it's totally cloudy because it's so totally clear. Well, what this thing does is it takes the reader and it just beats him over the head over and over again. 2 plus 3 is not equal to 2 times 3 because 2 plus 3 is 5 and 2 times 3 is 6. Can't you see this? Over and over again in the most polite legalese you can imagine. Well, he wrote up this document, the appeal, sent it back to Washington, D.C., and they had to admit that they'd made a mistake. So they did award us a patent. And the patent they awarded us is number 8591234. Now, the meaning of that, 8591234, might be obvious to you, but if you take a look at my website, or if you buy a set and look at the instruction manual, you'll see why that number is the only number that we possibly could have had awarded to us as a patent number for math magic blocks. Now, if you end up playing with the blocks, and you end up coming up with a way to figure out not just the addition, but all the multiplication blocks, including x, y, and z. If you can figure out what z is, then maybe you should go and work as the head of the USPTO. They need someone at the top. But I need to warn you about this z block, because I took a set over to a friend who has a business in town, and he has a bunch of guys that are doing trust analysis and placing orders and whatnot. I mean, these guys use math every day. I set it up on this front desk around 4 o'clock. Well, they all gathered around, like 5 of these guys, and they spent an hour and a half trying to figure out what the z block was. I mean, they were just totally sucked into this thing. They almost got it, and they had, a great time. I mean, Tom, the leader of the company, was, Bruce, what are you doing? These guys are on the clock, and they're not working for me. They're working for Math Magic Blocks. We had a good laugh about it. But if you can figure out the z, then I say you should feel as proud of yourself as a kid who's figured out that 1 plus 2 equals 3. You're just at a slightly more advanced level. So Math Magic Blocks history, of course, refers to all kinds of things. The next chapter is with a guy that I met at a party who made armor. I mean, like medieval armor, like shoes and breastplates and helmets and everything. And he goes to assemblies and gives talks and has the kids wear the armor and bumps over the head with a mace and whatnot. It's a lot of fun. He loves it, and it's a popular assembly. Well, he was telling me about this and explaining how difficult it was to hand work all this metal. And I said, well, Everett, why don't you just come down to my classroom? I have a metal chop saw, I've got a MIG welder, and I've got a plasma cutter. And he said, really? So he came down and spent 8 happy hours one Saturday doing all this stuff. And afterwards, he was just so grateful. It's like, I saved him a month's worth of work. He said, anything I can do to help you, let me know. Well, guess what Everett's business is? Internet marketing. So I was able to set up an appointment with him, and for free, he explained the ins and outs of website design and all this kind of stuff. So another magic moment. To be followed by something I put on Facebook recently about trying to upgrade my website. And sure enough, one of my students, Adrian, chimed in and said, hey, I run a website business. I'd be delighted to do your website for free. So that's almost the last story, but the last story is probably the punchline. At the school I worked at, there was a teacher who was asked to teach econ. Now, she doesn't like econ, but she was told that's what you're going to teach, so was teaching it, and it was as boring as she knew it was going to be. One day she had a flash of insight. She thought, I can make this class interesting. Let's make this a class about money. So she decided she would give $6 to every kid in the class. Generous teacher. Just give, right? And they would all start a business with that grub stake of $6. And they had to do cost accounting and future projections of earnings and profit loss statements and everything. Well, the class changed from being as boring as econ to the most exciting class that many of these kids had taken in high school. In fact, one parent later told my friend, you know, I want to thank you for turning my kid on to education, because he never has had a class like that. We took that $6. My school is located in a not wealthy section of town. We went down and bought chocolate chips and butter, because we already had flour, sugar, and salt. We baked up a big batch of cookies, and my son sold them all, and then took all those profits and plowed it back into more butter, more sugar, more flour, more chocolate chips. And he's created a little, like a famous Amos business out of this thing. And I've never seen him so excited about learning. Well, I mean, it was a total runaway success. And then one day, my teacher friend was called into the office and told, and I'm going to choose my words carefully, this is what she was told, you can't have students working for you. You must give the money back to them. But she never took any money from the students. She gave them $6 each. So when I heard that story, I was thinking, whoa, I better watch it, because I'm pretty naive and trusting and casual and not good with money. So I could easily be seen as one of these, you know, no-count lowlifes that have their hand in the till and they're robbing from education. So I figured what I have to do is somehow talk to the one person that's the most important person in the district to understand about mathematic blocks. So I made an appointment to see the superintendent. But I realized if I go in there with the mathematic blocks, what I really want him to do is play with the blocks. I don't want to explain them. But if your Uber boss says to you, hey, tell me about this, and you just sit there with a dumb grin on your face, that's not very good for your position in the district, or maybe your even length as a teacher. So I had to come up with some way so that my superintendent would not want to ask me to say anything. So I went down to the local thrift store and picked out a nice shirt, and with some black spray paint and masking tape, I created my own version of the French sailor's shirt. Now, of course, that French sailor's shirt then has to have my students put white makeup all over my face and nice red lips and black eyeshadow, and I was a mime. So I went into his office, sat there with my mathematic blocks, had in my lap, and the secretary said, you may go in now. So I went in and I met him at the door, and he said, what's it? And he looked at me and said, oh, you can't talk. Yeah. So we go into his office, close the door, and for 5 minutes, he's feverishly playing with these blocks. I don't say a word, and he's doing exactly what I'd hoped he'd do, which is just have fun with these blocks. So finally, at one point, he just, mid-block, he looks over at me and says, I haven't had this much fun in months. So it was a very productive meeting. What I told him was everything I've told you about. I just didn't want to have the people interpret incorrectly what my motives were or how I was running things, because my plan was to hire students and have them actually they make $10 an hour, but that money would not go to them straight, I would hold on to that money in a trust fund. And when they went to college, if they needed books or tuition or transportation or anything related to college expenses, then I'd pull out the money they'd earned and give it to them. Well, that could easily be open to a lot of abuse, but I think after my meeting with the superintendent, he felt that I was a good guy and that I was not actually after my kids' money. In fact, I explained that what I was planning on doing was making the profits from this thing go into a fund that would support a camp that I run every year for freshmen. It's like welcome to high school camp, because a lot of freshmen, they're kind of nervous, don't have a lot of friends. I've been running this camp for a long time, but recently with the economy doing what it's doing or not doing what it's not doing, a lot of kids have a hard time scraping up the money. So I was going to create a scholarship fund for my students. So on the way out, he says two things. He says, a lot of people come in here asking for money, but there's not too many that come in here asking if they can give their money. So that was a plus. And then the final thing he said as he shook my hand was, Bruce, let me know if you need any help with BioCamp, the camp. I mean, this is at a time when the superintendent and the district was facing a $66 million shortfall in the budget. And he's offering to help me financially. Now that's the magic of Math Magic Blocks.